Today we're going to look at conflict in the boardroom. This discussion was prompted by news that Gordon Brown and Tony Blair fell out very substantially during their time in the government. Now, we have somebody that's done a lot of work with boards, Professor Andrew Kakabadse. Now, Andrew, you've seen a lot of boards. Does that bear any reality that what's going on in politics happens in the boardroom too?
Yes, it does. And the first thing that you need to explore is the issue. What was the issue that really underlay the tension between the two men? And the issue probably was a completely different view on the policy of the Labour Party. The Tony Blair position was have the financial markets and the banks basically finance the welfare reforms. But that meant that you really went into shareholder value much more. And certainly from my conversations in the House of Lords, Tony Blair's government is seen as even more right-wing than Margaret Thatcher's. And it probably was right that Brown was much more of the traditional line of Labour Party policy. So it's the issue. And you can see from the perspective of both men, both are right. So in most boardroom conflicts, it's not that one is right or wrong, it's how do you reconcile two rights. If it's not the issue, it's personalities. And it's personalities in the sense of probably who represents the government or the company or the board or the issue best in the public arena. So the personality to represent, the personality to enhance and engender and improve on stakeholder relations, how you manage governments, how you manage press and media are very important issues. The third could just be personalities and that they don't like each other and there's no chemistry there. And that certainly is a factor which can taint many relationships. But I have to say from my experience, most chemistries that go bad, both parties work very hard to try and at least minimize the negative effects for a while.
So we can take conflict in the boardroom as read. It's a very common thing. Secondly, I guess what we need to look at is how this is handled. Mostly, I guess in the boardroom anyway, this never really comes out into the public arena.
It doesn't, and when it does, it's damaging, and you've got a case right now of HSBC and the chief executive Geoghegan, who supposedly wants a place on the board and wants to follow Stephen Green from CEO to chairman, and apparently is going to resign if that's not the case. But you know, with many of these sort of high-class companies, really very well-known companies, it is like government. Something is represented in the press. What you don't know is what's the truth. And my experience has been, once you dig deep behind the surface, the truth is considerably different to what is stated in the press. So if you go back to the Blair-Brown conflict, what is said in the press, you'd be maybe surprised to find that the two men got on for 80% of the time. And in the boardroom, it's much the same.
So how do we handle this conflict? I guess that's pretty important.
It's critical. And you need to understand the basis of the conflict, how long it's been there, how long the issues have not been discussed, and then what is the appetite of the various parties to address those conflicts. Let's say 70% of most conflicts are issues-based. Then there's a good dose of lack of chemistry as well. You may well have lack of respect or trust in each other to represent the company, or the board, or the government publicly through the press and media. And that representative skill is actually very important. So you can have a situation of two personalities just not getting on. And if you like, status and emotions getting in the way. What we don't know with many of these cases is what is the reality in the background. So what's represented in the press and media, from my experience, is a considerable distance from what is actually happening behind the scenes that nobody wants to talk about. So conflict in the boardroom can be many things. People-based, chemistry-based, issues-based, or sometimes press and media based, and what the company does is take a defensive position to handle that.
Now, you sometimes get called into these conflicts where the top team isn't working well together. How do you handle that?
You have to find out what is the cause, and usually it is both issues and chemistry. And you're trying to balance which of those two is it more. It's not either or, but it's both. If it's chemistry, you are forced to make a decision whether one or two of the top team members should leave. Because there's no way you can discuss that, because there's no appetite for the personalities to get on. If it's issues based, again, one or two of the personalities may leave because they are so genuinely believe that they're right, that in fact there is no negotiation left. So you're trying to find what is the negotiation space? What's the maneuverability? What's the appetite for people to discuss this? What's the appetite to come to some sort of shared view, which some may feel is a compromise? Now, a good 80% of the cases you can reach that. But from the very start, you do have to come to a view as to whether negotiation is possible or change of people is necessary.
So sometimes there's some pretty drastic action needed, but a fair bit of the time, some way you can come to a resolution.
You can. And that's the skill, really. Funnily enough, it doesn't take too long to gauge what's happening. The real challenge is building the relationships with each of the members of the board, or for that matter with the government, for them to want to address those issues. And please bear in mind one thing, that the issues themselves are very clearly known by every board member, all the members of the top team, including the chief executive, and equally all members of the government. So it's not as if you're somehow involved in an education. People do know what's happening and why and what its consequences will be. The question is, do they have the appetite to address that?
Andrew, that's some useful insight into a difficult and perhaps murky problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you.